Hello my bookish lovelies, Kira here, and today I'm going to be doing a review for The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. This has an old fairy tale feel to it mixed with Russian folklore. It's actually geared towards adult fantasy. In this book, fantasy becomes reality. This book is a very slow burn. Being the fact that it's just under 300 pages, it takes a long time for us to really start getting into the plot. I think the actual action only comes really at the last 100 pages. Because it takes so long for us to build up to everything. Given the fact that it is Russian folklore and fairy tales in cultures tend to be very deeply rooted in the cultures themselves. So we actually have to go through and they set everything up, and they take about 200 pages just setting everything up. The feel of the culture, the people in it, the other kind of supporting characters that actually take the helm, and you have a prominent kind of presence from them also. So setting up the characters and the narrative was really important in this book. This book is told in third-person, omnipresent point of view. Usually the point of view of this is from our protagonist Vasa, who we see born and raised in this book. Just after Vasa is born, Maria, who is Vasa's mother, actually dies shortly after giving birth to Vasa. The childbirth itself had just taken so much out of her. She was already skinny to begin with, and it just kind of depleted her resources, but she felt like it was so imperative for her to have this child who ends up being Vasa. She feels it's very important that she makes sure that Vasa is born, because she feels that this child is going to be very important to everything that's going on. So Maria, Vasa's mother, decides to give her life in childbirth for Vasa. The story shows Vasa growing up in a very, very complicated time. In Russia, where this is set, winter is 7 months out of the year. So during the summer months, and even sometimes during the winter months, we see Vasa becoming this wonderful, wild child who is not the cliche female that most men would want to marry, because most women are expected to be at home, tame, and they are expected to be well presented, and they are expected to cook and clean and everything else. And all Vasa wants to do is go out into the world and in nature and kind of just become this wild and free child. And actually she spends most of her time dirty and gets beat and yelled at for it quite a bit, because she has this really bad habit of disappearing into the woods for very long periods of time, which leaves her father and her kind of grandmother at odds with her, because she keeps doing this. This is a ongoing pattern for her. Seeing how wild she is, Vasa's father decides that he's going to go to Moscow to seek out a wife for himself, a new wife, since Maria, Vasa's mother, had died several years earlier. He never thought he would get remarried because he loved Vasa's mother. Vasa gave him many children and he loved her very, very much. So the fact that he's going to get remarried says a lot. He wants Vasa to have a strong female role model. And so in the pursuit of having a strong female role model, he actually ends up marrying the prince's daughter, Anna. And Anna kind of is a very interesting character in and of herself. She is actually seems to be possessed by demons. She sees demons all around her. She's extremely devout and religious, but she's also got this very nervous personality, and she's very thin. The prince pretty much looks at her and doesn't even think that she would be able to withstand one child at birth, but he figures that this would be a perfect time to strengthen his alliance with Vasa's father. And that's exactly what happens. And Anna ends up coming home, Vasa's father, and meets Vasa and becomes Vasa's stepmother. In this book, Vasa very much, you can tell, maybe not from the outside perspective, but from an inward perspective, when we have Vasa's perspective as a very special child. She ascribes very much to the old religion, and in their old religion, there's a lot of spirits around the house, there's a lot of things that are going on that are starting to fade, because a lot of people have stopped believing in this old religion, and the fairy tales that she grew up with are only that anymore. They're just fairy tales, and they're not necessarily anything anybody lives by anymore. A lot of people deem these entities that help her to protect everything as being demons and devil worship. So the new religion is trying to take out the old religion. Now this book originally was pitched as a girl, Vasa, who goes out into the woods. She's actually kind of forced out into the woods, but you actually only see that in the last 100 pages, when she actually goes in into the woods, and you get more out of it than her just wandering out to the woods, because she wanders out to the woods so many times in this book. She wanders out so many times just to have adventures and to explore and to be wild and be free. And she doesn't aspire to being the cliche woman. She aspires to be just herself and to love nature. So this book, when they pitch it to you, when they talk about what they talk about in the synopsis, that only actually happens like within like the last 100 pages of this book. Like it takes forever for us to really get into the action of this. This book is like a giant Russian fairy tale targeting adults. And so like, because like it is targeted towards adults, like it is better fleshed out than just the standard folklore fairy tale that we kind of get in the beginning of this. One of the biggest things like about like this that I really struggled with is the fact like that this, for each one of the characters that we have in this book, we have multiple names, quite often like very disorienting, and I struggled with it quite frequently. So I think that was probably like the most confusing portion of this. I often felt like the further I got into like this, the more I struggled with it. Now, towards the end of this, there is a glossary in this, but you know, I'm kind of like a go with the flow kind of reader, and I don't like to have to go back and continuously reference the glossary just to understand a book. Like I feel like that is such a hard thing to do, and I feel like it takes you out of the story so much. And so like that portion for me was really difficult to kind of come to terms with. Now overall, like I understood the vast majority of this and who they were talking about, like because if they used like a different name for like this one character, like maybe like a few paragraphs up, they did eventually end up using the right name a little bit further down. I really loved Vassia in this. She's such a strong, resourceful character. She stands out from like a lot of the other characters. Now, I will say another thing too about this is like you have to be willing to read this for the fantasy. You don't read this for anything else but the fantasy. The fantasy portion of this and the fairy tales is what this book is really all about. If you were looking for like a lot of character development, if you're looking for like a lot of progression in the characters, I don't think you're really going to get that from this book. There is a little bit of character development, but I wouldn't say like it is as pronounced as it could be as far as like some of the other books like that I've read. I believe like this book really does center around the fairy tale, and you really have to be willing to read this book for the fairy tale element unto itself, and maybe not necessarily like for a lot of other reasons. Overall, like this book was extremely enchanting and I really enjoyed it. Like I thought it was just such a really amazing, really good read. Overall, like I found this book really extremely beautiful and enchanting, and while it was a slow burn, like that didn't really bother me so much. I thought it like really like was working up to something, and though it took a long time for us to work up to it, I really thought like this book overall was really good, and I really liked the atmosphere and everything else in it. Like it just had so much intrigue, and like the story progression was very steady. Overall, I did rate this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really good. Now, this is the part like where I stop with the spoiler-free portion of this. So from here on out, I'm not going to really be discussing like anything like spoiler-free. Like this is pretty much like the end of my spoiler-free review. I only so the next portion, if you do not want spoilers for this book, if you don't want me to discuss those spoilers with you, then do not progress past this. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we are on to the spoilers. So at the beginning of this book, we are told a fairy tale that is a less fleshed out version of what actually happens in this book. It is actually kind of goes full circle. So if you guys like pay attention like very closely like to the fairy tale at the beginning of this book that is told right from the get-go in the first chapter, we actually see a lot of what happens like simplistically, like kind of a rough summary of that fairy tale and pretty much like the rest of the book. And I really kind of appreciate like that. It really felt like everything went full circle. I also appreciate like with this also is the fact like that right at the beginning of this, we actually see Anna who sees demons, but that just means that she has the sight, which I kind of thought was really kind of cool, like because it was almost like a mind-bending like a little bit, because Vassia can actually see the same things that Anna can see, but Anna sees them as demons because she's devoutly religious, while Vassia sees them as just general house spirits like that she pays tribute to. They're considered to be part of the old religion, and so she's not allowed to talk about them because like it's considered blasphemous and it's considered devil worship. But I really liked that portion of this because it was like you got two different takes, two different perspectives of the same thing in this book. Another thing like that's kind of interesting is like the Bear and the Nightingale like actually meant something very different from like what I actually originally thought it meant in the beginning of this. So actually the bear is the king of nightmares. He kind of manifests like in the priest's relics that the priest had actually created, and I thought that was really cool too. The priest actually thought that the that he was blessed by God, and God was talking through these relics, and it turned out to be like this evil entity that was the king of nightmares that's actually considered the bear. The bear has been sleeping for a very long time and is starting to wake up, and Vasya feeding the demons or the house spirits has actually been keeping this bear at bay and keeping him bound. The Nightingale is actually the horse of the Winter King. The Winter King is actually the brother of the bear. They're actually twin brothers, so like they're actually two opposites in this. While the bear is kind of like the king of nightmares, like the Winter King is actually like the king of dreams. He's the king of winter, and he actually like rules like, you know, stronger at certain times of the year depending on how prominent winter is during this time. So there is actually like a little bit of a romance in here towards the end. We actually don't hear a ton about it, but it's actually between Vasya and the Winter King. And I actually really liked how they alluded to the romance. Like, it wasn't heavy on the romance, but like I wish we had gotten more of that, because I really liked the element of that in this. It was just such a beautiful like add-on to it, and I just wish we would have gotten more. Russian folklore always had vampires in it, and so we got a little bit of vampires in this as well. They had a different word for vampires in this, but like it wasn't like actual like vampire, like it was umpire. It was spelled U-P-Y-R, which actually is pronounced vampire. I think that's the correct pronunciation for it, but like they really didn't go too much into that as well. Like they just kind of considered like them night walkers, and the way that they actually disposed of the night walkers was pretty much the same way that they disposed of vampires themselves. But I really like the fact that we, like, in the mix of all of this Russian folklore, they actually managed to include vampires in this. Now, the most heartbreaking, I think, portion of this book was the fact like that in order to bind the bear, a sacrifice had to be made, and Vasya's father had to sacrifice himself in order for the bear to be bound once again. And this was very heartbreaking because it really tore up Vasya and the rest of the family. The protection that Vasya had received from her father towards the rest of the villagers was no longer in place after everything was said and done, and Vasya ended up leaving her brother and her little sister, who ended up being her half-sister through Anna, and was gone after this. Like, and she went back out into the woods to the Winter King. Now, that's pretty much like where the story like leaves off, and because being the fact that this is the first in the book, I can tell you like right now that this book actually does pick up like in the second book where this one left off. I really, really enjoyed this book. I thought there was so many wonderful aspects to it, and I really highly recommend it. I've already started like the second book, and you guys will be getting a review from me for that book as well. I highly recommend this. This is a wonderful folklore Russian fantasy, and I really think you guys should read it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like this video, hit the little like, hit subscribe, with the little bell icon if you guys want to receive emails every single time I post. I'm also on Instagram, Amazon, Goodreads, and Twitter. Those links are linked in the description below. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again very soon.